to the TokyoBill Weekly, stories from Japan, told from Japan. This week, how Japan went from having no professional football league to facing Brazil in the World Cup knockout stage, and the manga that started it all. On June 25th, Japan drew Sweden 1 goal apiece in their final group stage match of the 2026 World Cup, enough for both teams to advance to the round of 32. Japan finished second in their group. They will face Brazil in the knockout stage. Brazil, 5-time World Cup winners, arguably the most storied footballing nation on the planet. It is, on paper, a daunting prospect. It is also, if you know the story of how Japan got here, a moment that would have been completely unimaginable 40 years ago. This is that story. Cast your mind back, if you can, to 1981. Japan has no professional football league. The sport has a small following, largely confined to universities and a few corporate teams. Baseball dominates. Sumo holds its ancient, spiritual place at the center of national identity. Football, or soccer, as most Japanese called it, is something people vaguely know about, a foreign game with unclear rules that occasionally appears on television when a major international tournament is on. Japan has never qualified for a World Cup. There is no realistic expectation that it ever will. That year, a young manga artist named Yoichi Takahashi published the first chapter of a series called Captain Tsubasa. Takahashi had been transfixed watching the 1978 World Cup in Argentina on television. Japan was not competing, but the spectacle had gripped him, and he decided he wanted to share that feeling with Japanese children who had no reason yet to care about football. The series follows Tsubasa Ozora, an 11-year-old boy with a single obsession: to become the best footballer in the world and win the World Cup for Japan. His motto, stated early in the story, is simple: "The ball is my friend." What happened next is one of the stranger cultural cause and effect stories in modern sport. Captain Tsubasa pushed a generation to embrace football for the first time. An estimated 250,000 Japanese boys enrolled in football schools between 1981 and 1987. In 1981, when the manga began, the number of registered football players in Japan was just 68,900. In less than a decade, the number of elementary and middle school football teams almost tripled. The manga and anime inspired a generation of children to take up the sport, leading to the formation of the J-League, Japan's first professional football league, in 1992, and Japan's eventual qualification for the FIFA World Cup. Of the 23 players in the Japanese national team that participated in the 2002 World Cup, 16 said they had developed a love for football after watching Captain Tsubasa, including Hidetoshi Nakata, the player who would become Japan's first genuine global football star, playing for AS Roma at the height of Series A's dominance of European football. Nakata said explicitly that it was Captain Tsubasa, not baseball, that made him pick up a ball as a boy. The series became a global phenomenon in ways nobody anticipated. Zinedine Zidane, Alessandro Del Piero, Fernando Torres, Andres Iniesta, Lionel Messi, Kylian Mbappe, Neymar, and Ronaldinho have all credited Captain Tsubasa with inspiring their love of the game. A Spanish footballer currently playing in the Premier League has a tattoo of the Captain Tsubasa characters on his leg. The cartoon about a Japanese boy dreaming of a World Cup that seemed impossible turned out to be the thing that taught half the world's greatest footballers to dream. Japan made its first World Cup appearance in France in 1998, qualifying for the first time, exiting in the group stage but going. 4 years later, as co-hosts alongside South Korea, they reached the round of 16 for the first time under their French coach Philippe Troussier, beating Russia and Tunisia before falling to Turkey. That tournament, the first World Cup held in Asia, is the one many people of a certain age remember most clearly, including yours truly. The atmosphere in Japan was unlike anything the country had experienced in modern sport. Streets emptied for matches, strangers gathered around screens in shopping centers and British pubs. A country that had been told it was not a football country discovered, over the course of a few weeks in the summer of 2002, that it very much was. Since then, Japan has qualified for every World Cup without interruption. Japan was the first nation in the world to qualify for the 2026 World Cup in March 2025, after an almost perfect run through the Asian qualifiers, including a 7-0 victory against China. At Qatar 2022, they beat Germany and Spain, two of Europe's most decorated footballing nations, in the group stage, finishing top of a group that also included Costa Rica, before losing to Croatia on penalties in the round of 16. Current coach Hajime Moriyasu has become Japan's most successful World Cup coach in history, moving ahead of Trussier's 2 wins in 2002. The current squad is the most globally experienced Japan has ever sent to a World Cup. Players like Ritsu Doan, Daichi Kamada, and Daizen Maeda play their club football in Europe, Germany, France, Scotland. The pipeline from Japanese youth football to the top European leagues, which barely existed in 1998, is now well established. Japan produces technically refined, tactically disciplined players who are sought after by clubs across the continent. That transformation did not happen by accident. It happened because a generation of Japanese children grew up wanting to be Captain Tsubasa, enrolled in football schools, became good enough to be noticed, and built a system around themselves. There is something worth marinating on in that origin story. Japan's rise as a footballing nation was not primarily driven by a government program, a wealthy investment, or the arrival of foreign coaches imposing a new system, though those things played their part. It was driven by a cartoon, by a boy and a ball and a dream that seemed absurd when it was written and turned out to be a blueprint. The creator of Captain Tsubasa said he was hoping to share the excitement of what he had seen at the 1978 World Cup through his drawings, and hoped football would become more popular in Japan. That is perhaps the most modest description of a cultural revolution on record. Japan also brings something distinctive to how it plays. The fairness, the discipline, the attention to detail. These are not coaching imports. They are expressions of something already present in Japanese culture, now channeled through a sport. At the 2018 World Cup in Russia, Japan were eliminated at the round of 16 by Belgium in one of the most dramatic matches of the tournament, losing 3-2 after leading 2-0 with 10 minutes to play. What people remember as much as the result is what happened after the match. The Japanese supporters, having just watched their team suffer a devastating collapse, stayed behind to clean their section of the stadium. They picked up their own rubbish, bagged it, and left the stands immaculate. It was photographed by dozens of journalists and shared around the world. It was spontaneous. It was not organized. It is simply what they do. The Japanese players cleaned their dressing room too, leaving it spotless, and a note in Russian that read, "Thank you." That combination, technically excellent, tactically smart, intensely competitive, and unfailingly courteous, is what the Samurai Blue now represent to global football. They are not the underdog story they once were. 8 consecutive World Cup qualifications, multiple round of 16 appearances, landmark wins over Germany and Spain. They are a fixture of the tournament, expected to be there, expected to compete. And, as of this recording, on the weekend of June 27th, 2026, they prepare to face Brazil, 5-time champions, the country where Kazuyoshi Miura, Japan's own King Kazu, and one of the earliest Japanese players to go abroad, learned the game in his youth and brought it home. The circle is not quite complete, but it is getting there. 45 years ago, a cartoonist watched a World Cup on television and decided to draw a story about a Japanese boy who wanted to win it. The boy's name was Tsubasa. His motto was that the ball is his friend. On current evidence, a lot of Japanese footballers took that seriously. That's the Tokyo Bill Weekly for June 27th, 2026. I've been, and remain, Tokyo Bill. Thank you for listening, and take care.